And one perspective that we can really, I'm pretty sure will serve us well is Congressman Paul Ryan's perspective here. I mean, he is sitting on the budget committee right now. I was going through his roadmap for America bill, and I don't know who handed it to me. Maybe it was Ted or so, but I remember going through it, and I mean, he has gone into detail just as much as we were in the details in the healthcare session with Congressman Bill Thomas. I'm pretty sure that we can get into detail like that. But given that you're going to be giving us the closing remarks, capping off a day of good conversation, I hope that you can point us in the right direction, because tomorrow's going to be a day of grassroots implementation, and basically we're going to take your remarks and we're going to take them into our grassroots workshops and say, hey, look, how can we bring this on the ground? So go ahead and rally the troops in whichever direction.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it. How about I don't talk too long and answer your questions? It's probably you're coming near the end of the year thing here, aren't you? So I don't want to give you too long of a lecture or anything like that. Let's just start with this. You obviously know the size of the problem. I think just by virtue of the fact that you're in this group, you've been participating here all day. I won't go into the size of the problem. You know the time horizon of the problem. You know that the time horizon of the problem is accelerated to right now. The question that you ought to ask as you tackle this problem, this is my opinion, of course, is number one, what are the values of the country? What is it that we want to continue achieving in America? I think there's consensus in this country that what we want to achieve in this country is we still want a safety net. We still believe we ought to have a social safety net for people who cannot help themselves and for people who are temporarily down on their luck. Right? Let's just put that. Most people agree with that. Not all people, but most people agree with that. I agree with that. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we want to make sure that this safety net doesn't turn into a hammock where people lapse into lives of dependency on the government, where the safety net actually ends up draining people of their will to reach their destiny, to work hard, to get ahead, to tap their potential. That's important. Number three, how do we do that while we move forward in the 21st century, knowing we've got these big problems, demographic problems, healthcare price, cost problems, and all of those things. And the inevitable conclusion really has to become, this is my opinion again, is you need to have a system where you convert these entitlement programs from where they are to where they can be sustainable, because they're clearly completely unsustainable. And the way I would argue doing it, which is in my roadmap, which is you can go to AmericanRoadmap.org if you want to get a copy of it. I'm rewriting it now to reflect the most recent numbers, is a defined benefit safety net. So that we have that safety net there that's not only sustainable but reliable for those folks who, as I just mentioned, can't help themselves or are temporarily down on their luck. A safety net which achieves the goals of health and retirement security with a defined contribution system on top. Converting our entitlements from a complete defined benefit system to a hybrid of a defined benefit safety net with a defined contribution system on top makes the system sustainable. And better yet, and more importantly, eventually converts the system to one where you actually own it, where it is your rights and your benefits. Right now, these key things in our lives, retirement and health care, are benefits that are only available to you subject to the whims of politicians, of Congress. There's no Social Security account with your name on it. This isn't your money. You don't have a right to it. There's no contractual obligations that government must pay these things to you. Worse yet, at your age, you're going to get a probably negative % rate of return. At my age, about a 1% rate of return. More than 80% of the people in this country pay more in FICA taxes than they do in all the other taxes. Worse yet, healthcare, that one's the biggest challenge of them all. And so the question is, do we want more government involvement in our daily lives? Do we want the government making more critical decisions for us? Do we want the government parachuting itself into that relationship between the patient and the doctor? Or do we want to give people power? Do we want individuals to be sovereign? Do we want individuals? I mean, look at your generation. I like to think of myself as somewhat still young. When I was a young guy growing up, I would hope that the favorite song that I had at the time would maybe be played once on the radio. Now I get my Nano, my iPod. Hey, what can you do from Led Zeppelin's probably my favorite song right now. I just listen to it on the way over here. It's at my demand. The point I'm trying to make is we are in an iPod, Amazon.com, Orbitz, Travelocity society. When you demand choice at your fingertips in every aspect of your lives, why shouldn't you demand it at government? So we don't want to have government deprive you of the kinds of choices you expect everywhere else you go through society. So let's convert these systems so that people run them. People decide how these benefits are deemed to be there for them. And let's convert the ownership of these really important things in our lives, like health and retirement security, from the government to the individual. And let's have a safety net that's reliable and sustainable. And if we convert these systems in that way, we can preserve the legacy of this country, which is to leave the next generation better off. You probably know by now that the next generation will not be better off. That is an irrefutable fact. I encourage you to challenge me on that notion. Please. If you don't agree with me, please challenge me. Because I want to convert you to the facts, to the truth, to just quantification. When my kids are my age, they're going to have to pay twice the level of taxes we pay today just to keep this current government afloat at that time. And you're not going to be able to pass on the American engine of prosperity and growth. And the whole point of this country is to get to the point of equalizing opportunity. There's a lot of people in this country that haven't gotten that opportunity yet, that haven't gotten to that even bottom rung of the economic ladder. Cutting off the higher rungs of the economic ladder is not going to extend the bottom rung to those who haven't achieved it yet. We've got to make sure that this ladder is there for everybody. And we've got to make sure that this engine of opportunity, that this engine of economic growth is there for the next generation. And the only way to do that is to convert these entitlement programs into fiscally sustainable ways. Now, I would strenuously argue that the path we're on right now is the wrong path. It's the path that's going to give us more debt, higher taxes, less freedom. And it's the path that is going to ultimately, at the end of the day, take away choices from those of us who are individuals who like to make certain decisions in our lives about how our lives are to be run and how our lives are to be conducted, and intimate things such as how our retirement and health policies are going to be organized. And so at the end of the day, this is really more of a moral issue. I'm not going to preach numbers. I can get into that if you want to. Morally, at the end of the day, who's going to be in charge of your life? That's really what these sort of things come down to. Because if we stay on the road we are on, if we continue down the path, with the unsustainable crisis, the fiscal crisis we have before us, you will not have as many choices as you have today. There will not be as many opportunities available to you in which to take your life and to pursue your destiny if our government inevitably grows to the size that it will have to grow if we don't reform these programs. And I'll just leave it at that. And I'm glad that young people are taking an interest in these issues. Perhaps I gave you a perspective you haven't heard yet today, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks.
With that, when you ask for your questions, make sure to identify yourself and which organization you're with. And with that,
Luke Rapici, the Association of Young Americans. Congressman, thanks for being here. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the grassroots efforts, what we can do to take the knowledge we've learned about these issues and go forward. What is it, as a member of Congress, that you would like to see from young people in terms of how can we help? When you're out there talking about these issues, but a lot of your other members aren't. How can we help create safe space for those discussions?
That's a really good point. My goal is to change the politics of this. Right now, 99% of members of Congress will not tackle this issue because they're afraid of losing their elections. They will not tackle this issue because they're afraid the other party will demagogue them for taking a risk politically. Both parties, I'm not saying this is just both parties have this problem. And so, what has to change? The political undercurrents under entitlement reform are tackling these issues. And so my hope is that we go from a politics where both parties are afraid of tackling today's problems to where the political peril occurs to that politician who doesn't tackle that problem. So help us change the politics of this so that the public are demanding action from their elected representatives to tackle these fiscal challenges in our country. Here, the key point is time. Right now, and I've demonstrated this in my plan, and the actuaries will back all of this up, you can convert all of these entitlements to a sustainable pathway along the lines I just discussed without changing them for people who are in and near retirement. You know, my mom's in her mid to late 70s. You know, it's a little late to change these things for her. People who are 60 years old, you know, they're 57 years old, they've already organized their lives around these programs. And if we act now, we can prevent those in and near retirement, 55 and above, from having substantial disruption in their lives or big change late in their life. And we can change these programs for people under 55, and they have time to adjust for the changes. But if we don't do this soon, it's about $4 trillion a year, we go deeper into the hole. If we don't do this soon, we will not be able to prevent those in and near retirement from having this disruptive change. And so really that's a key part of it. The biggest employer in my district used to be General Motors. And I've watched their finances really closely over the years. And General Motors is sort of a microcosm of the country. Demographically, they're about 10 years ahead of where we are. And General Motors is just on its back. It is bankrupt. And it has these legs that have really brought it into a tailspin. That's where we are going to be in a handful of years. And there's no one to bail us out. You know, the taxpayer can only do so much. And so, get the politics changed. The best thing you can do is encourage young people to get educated on this issue, show them the facts, and then have them hold elected officials accountable for ducking these issues. That, to me, is the key thing of all.
Smoot Carter from Yale University.
I just love that name. Your name is Smoot. S-M-U-O-O-T?
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
All right, yeah, college outreach organization. As a conservative, how are you utilizing the current state of the economy, issues such as these to mobilize young members of the party or young people in general?
I mean, I don't look at this as a Republican Democrat thing. Look, I believe in the principles that founded this country: liberty, freedom, self-determination, free enterprise. And what I try to tell people, young people, everybody, look, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Christian, agnostic, Muslim, gay, straight, man, woman, black, white, Latino, Asian, or in between. None of that matters. The point is, do you agree that we ought to preserve these principles? Liberty, freedom, self-determination, free enterprise. If you do, then let's work together to fix this country. Let's work together to apply those principles to the problems of the day so we can solve these problems. That, to me, is what matters here. And we practice such divisive politics these days that are going to rip up this country. And if those divisive politics continue on as they have been, then we're never going to get to fixing these problems. And these problems are going to tackle us. I mean, they're just going to swallow us up. And so, at the end of the day, do you look at the living standards and the future of people in different countries, and you can tell the countries that have tackled these fiscal challenges, that have kept their governments lean and limited, focused on its core priorities, are the countries where people have a brighter future, where younger people have more access to opportunities. And that, to me, is really what it's all about. And so this really shouldn't be a Republicans better than Democrats thing. This is are we going to make America the engine of prosperity and achievement in the 21st century like it was in the 20th century? Are we going to break the barriers that we have yet to break through or not? And that, to me, is what it's all about. Yeah.
Josh Gordon from the Concord Quotient. What happens if all evidence suggests that people make poor choices? Doctors and patients, for instance.
Then they learn from those poor choices. I'm just not one of these people who believe in being paternalistic and arrogant, that I in Washington am going to be able to figure out how to run your life better than you are. And not every single American has to be a great decision maker for this freedom to work. It's worked pretty well, I'd say, so far. But more importantly, let's say doctors and healthcare. It's not every single consumer that has to be a brilliant consumer. It's that 10th consumer out of 10 consumers that has to be that brilliant consumer, which is what those providers are competing for, that person's business. Let me put it this way. My wife and I, we have 3 little kids, so we need minivans, and I have a Suburban. My wife has minivans that, the car seats, and you got the strollers behind the car seat and all of that stuff. Believe me, you're not at this stage yet. When you do, you will never believe the day you actually bought a minivan, right? Because you thought you'd never own a minivan, right? I own a minivan. Never thought I would, but I do. The point I'm trying to make is, I don't know anything about cars. cars. But I wanted to make sure I bought a car that was reliable, that had good resale, that wouldn't break down all the time. And so I go on Consumer Reports and I figured it out. And you know what? The car companies aren't competing for me because I just buy it, looks good, price is okay. They're trying to get the guy in the showroom who actually opens up the hood and looks in the engine, actually knows something about cars. And they're competing for that consumer. I am benefiting because of that consumer, because of his knowledge, and he scrutinizes them. And they are competing for his choice. I am benefiting from the fact that he is a good consumer. So not every single individual American has to be a brilliant consumer for freedom and choice to work in society. Enough people have to be good consumers for all the rest of us to benefit from that. And you know what? There are a lot of smart people in this country. Give people more faith and credit. Don't think that we in government know more than they do. They're gonna fix this problem, I think. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Daniel Ortiz. I'm going to be on that. I guess I'd like to revisit what you were saying about coming from an area where GM has a strong presence. I'm from Steeltown, Ohio, and
We're in Ohio.
we're in Ohio.
Yeah, I went to Miami, so I know the state a little bit.
Very good, very good. And I think, as you were saying that the situation with GM is similar to the microcosm that's going on in America, in particular regarding the legacy program. I guess with that, do you think the promise made was too big, or do you think that, costs outpaced the way in which they keep an actual agreement or contract, and how does that have implications, if you could elaborate for the current state?
You're talking about entitlements or GM in particular?
Well, it's the correlation of GM.
Right. So GM made a bunch of contractual promises. They made them in the time when they had probably twice the market share they do right now, when income was good, and then the economy fell out from under them. They got more competition. They couldn't make as much, and their legacy costs overtook their income, and they went bankrupt. Technically speaking, they went bankrupt. So, what's the correlation with federal government? We're making all these promises to people, and we don't have the money to fund them. How big are those promises? $62 trillion. $62 trillion. I mean, these numbers move around. The Federal Reserve says it's 100 trillion. GAO says 62. I use a low number. $62 trillion of the unfunded liabilities, basically with 3 programs. Promises we're making, the government's making to people, short of what it has the ability to pay. That means we have to take $62 trillion today and invest it at Treasury rates on the hopes that therefore we could pay the benefits to my mom's generation, my generation, and your generation. You're kind of closer to my generation, my kids' generation. And so, just like GM, the government is making promises to people that it will not be able to pay. And if it tries to pay those promises, it will kill our economy. I asked the Congressional Budget Office, they're not right, left, they're just the Congressional Budget Office. What would the tax rates on my kids have to be when they're roughly my age to pay these promises if we're going to raise taxes to pay them, which is inevitably how you'll have to do this? They said the lowest income tax bracket for low-income Americans will go from 10%, where it's now, to 25%. The middle-income tax brackets for middle-income taxpayers would go to 66%. And the top income tax bracket, which is one of the most small businesses pay, will go to 88%. You will kill our economy if that happens. And so that's the actual statutory tax rate that will have, the income tax rates that will have to occur under the current income tax system we have today if we're going to tax our way out of this problem. That is the tax rates the CBO says will have to be paid by my 3 children when they're my age, in their late 30s. That's the problem. Oh, I got to go to budget meeting. I apologize. Last question? Did you have your hand? Yeah.
Sean Charles, the CEO of Financial Literacy Company at YAC. I'm not going to give you some detail. I'm just wondering your thoughts on how to effectively communicate between 2 classes. I'm just calling them 2 classes for simplicity. You have your politicians and higher education and everybody else. You have the sustainability society and the instant gratification society. So what are your thoughts on how to marry these?
Wow, I don't have time to go into all that. That's a good question. Look, I don't like, what really bothers me, and both parties do this, and pollsters tell you to do this, I don't like splitting people into classes. I'm against that. I just think that's a bad idea. If you start segregating people into classes, you're going to segregate further. I don't even want to go down that path. So just intellectually, I reject the notion of segregating people into classes. We're all in the same thing together. And so I think the key question is talk to people about their future and to be really truthful about just the hard, cold facts of the situation we are in and the situation we're heading into. And you can do it without numbers, and you can do it just, you can explain it fairly easily. And that, to me, is what it's all about. This is the greatest country in the world. And the reason it's the greatest country in the world is because we're free. Really free. And there's different kinds of freedom. There's, political freedom and free speech. But economic freedom is a pretty darn important one, too. And that economic freedom, I think, is being compromised because of these problems. And I just worry that if we lose more of our economic freedom, that people are going to be drained of their ability to achieve their God-given potential, to reach their destiny. And the incentive to do that is going to be drained in our society. And as a result, our society will stagnate, we'll have lower standards of living, and we'll have chronically high unemployment. Now, I can give you quantitative analysis of this, but morally, I think the point is we want to have an opportunity society in this country for the 21st century, and we're definitely compromising that right now.
The economic freedom is